Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago. We are live here on Freedom 106.5 FM. And today we're stepping into the conversation about finding that balance between work life and home life. And my guest today, Mrs. Michelle Boxall Dunkley. She's a native of Trinidad and Tobago who resides in Jamaica with her husband of 31 years, and they have 2 adult children. Mrs. Boxall Dunkley is a counseling psychologist who works in the Jamaican school system as a guidance counselor, and she has a passion for young people, as is evident in her involvement in schools and her football club and her church ministry. She's also dubbed herself the Pink Warrior, being a 2-year breast cancer survivor, a fact that she credits to her firm faith in God and holds on to his promise in Jeremiah 29:11 that his plans are for her own, for her good plans. And also in studio with me is Mr. Ryan Bechu. He's a multimedia journalist and the Guardian Media for the last 13 years in his native Trinidad and Tobago. Having started as an intern, Ryan rapidly rose through the ranks, junior reporter, producer, and ultimately anchor of several news and current affairs programs. And I'm sure once he starts to speak, you will recognize the voice. So welcome, lady and gents. Good morning to you, Mrs. Dunkley.
Good morning, everyone.
And Mr. Bechu.
Good morning to all of our viewers, to our listeners. I'm from TV, I'm sorry. Good morning to you, Tasca, as well as Michelle.
So just a little up with
A little bit up.
Yes.
There we go.
So today we're talking about, finding that balance between work life and home life. And I wanted to start with you, Mrs. Dunkley. How do we find that balance? Is it that our personalities tend to draw us into work, or is it like an escape in some regards?
All right. Well, really, I guess we'd have to look at what that work-life balance is first, so at least what it's supposed to be. And, it's a job, amount of time you spend, pursuing personal interests, hobbies, spending time with loved ones and so on. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if I don't think there's a formula, I must say I have looked at my husband over the years and wonder, just how does he find time to be involved in the myriad of things that he is involved in, so I guess it will come down to a personal thing, because in the same breath, you have persons that they just can't find time to do anything, but then there are those that it just seems like they're just involved in everything and still taking on, things, I don't know if those are the persons who can't say no, I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any particular formula.
Mr. Bechu, what do you think?
I think it's, well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. But just for the benefit of our listenership, I think Tasca invited me on not because I'm the perfect example for this conversation, but perhaps because I'm the perfect bad example for this conversation. Because striking that work-life balance, and it's good to have, I guess, an example, or at least a not so good example, so to show the progress that men need to make when it comes to work-life balance. And I fully agree with Michelle. It's very difficult sometimes to understand how men go through life and how they make time for certain things that you would otherwise think that they're just way too busy for. But that's one area of my life that I've largely struggled with. And when I was invited onto the program, I was a little bit hesitant because, like I just mentioned to you, I thought I am a pretty bad example of that, because balancing work and having a life itself is something that is very imbalanced for me personally, but it's a lifelong struggle and a professional struggle as well to get better at it, because the consequences are very real. And I've come off the back of what has been a very busy year, just like Michelle has been observing her husband for a number of years. I've observed myself over the course of this year. Professionally, I've been there. I've done a lot of work professionally, but ask me what have I done for myself. Ask me what I've done, to better my mental capacity. Ask me what I've done to refresh my body in a certain way. And Tosca, the answer would be really, I can't think of anything at the moment, and it's so critical.
Yeah, the thing is, before we started the discussion, we were having a discussion
Just
off air.
Yeah.
And we were briefly talking about, what you do, and probably if you give them an idea as to how much you really do. And one of the comments I agreed with is that when we arrive at home, our minds are still focusing on, okay, I still have this interview to get, this is a real great quote from this person. I need to get it done in the morning. So just give us a brief idea of what your job entails, and probably they will understand how we are discussing work-life balance.
Yeah, you could allude to it, Tosca, because your days are very, your life and you were in the same industry.
Yes.
So you know very well. But you're very right. You're 100% right. Each day just leads into the other for us, and I'm not just going to say to myself, and I want to broaden the conversation a little bit, because even people who aren't in the media industry, even people who aren't in the broadcasting industry, some people, a friend and I were talking about being entrepreneurs and business people. Business people, if you own a business, they're probably not sleeping as much as we are sleeping, because each day again leads into the next. So I was back at work at 8 o'clock. I got home at 9:30 last night. I was back at work at 8 o'clock, and even when I got home at 9:30, I started prepping for today. So what are some of the big stories that we could look out for today? East Port of Spain is in the newspaper right now. It's in the front pages at the moment. The Prime Minister had a very important press conference yesterday. A lot was said there. How can we follow up on it? So you're already thinking ahead as to what today will look like. So, the news aspect of it is just 1 hour on air per night, where people may see you for 60 minutes. But in reality, my day actually starts around 8 a.m. I try not to get to work for later than 9 a.m. I come in, start working on midday news. Like you said, try getting interviews with some of the major players. And then from there, you get into writing stories for the 7 o'clock news. You're checking other people's stories. Then we've got several meetings to set the agenda for the day, to keep the agenda on course for the day, then to decide what gets into the newscast and what gets into the paper. So it's a very, very long day, largely very fruitful, very gratifying. But I think Michelle alluded to it best, with all of this happening, you sort of lose yourself.
Yes. Mrs. Dunkley, how do we define and separate the work person from home person? What's some of the tips you can give to us? Are you there?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Oh, okay. All right. Right. So, one of the things that I think is important to really understand is that, the work aspect of us is simply one aspect of life, and so in a real sense, you can separate it. So what I'm going to say probably sounds contradictory, but you should separate it. So there should be an intentional separation,
I agree.
To have that work-life balance. For some persons, I know that's not so easy, and even for myself, I came into work yesterday at 7:30. Before I could open my door, there was a parent and a child. I had them for 3 hours. Then there was a next parent. I had classes, a number of things. That, there was just no time to stop, and that went way into the night. I left my workplace way in the evening, and you go home and you're still, there are things that as Ryan said, you take home things, you're thinking about what is right, what's going to happen, for the next day and so on. So I think one of the things that is important to do is to really stop and evaluate, what is happening with my situation now, and so we ask some questions. Is the quality time that I'm spending with those, with my family, is there enough time that I'm spending with them? Are they sidelined? Does work become the priority? Am I missing my children's big events, or even the small ones? The soccer game, those things like that. The birthdays. What's happening? Am I, shrouded in work and I don't have time to do these simple things and remember the persons who are around. So we really need to stop and evaluate, what's happening. And, once we can see what's happening, then we'll know how to go forward. So that's the first thing I would say. Stop and really look at what's happening with your current situation.
Yeah.
I have some other points, and if you want me to go through all of
Michelle,
them,
sure.
I just want to jump in really quickly because I think Michelle has asked some very good questions there, and it's been a little bit deeper for me. I found myself, I'm not married, I don't have children, and the questions similar to that of Michelle that Michelle is asking. The questions that I have found myself asking, Tosca, is why is work so important to so many of us? And let's forget the financial gain. Okay, we all need money to survive. We need to buy groceries. We need to pay our bills. All very important. But why? Why is it that beyond 8 hours, there is this need to take work home? Is it because we're so task oriented? Why is it we feel the need to, and I don't have the answer to it, so I'm just telling you a question. Yeah, I'm just telling you. Why, after a very long day of being so productive, some of us don't even take our lunch hours. We work through our lunch hours. We eat at our desks. But why is it that after such productive long days, do we still feel the need to take work home that could otherwise be redirected to early morning or tomorrow? It's a question that I've been it's been plaguing my own career, my own professional life, because we do so much already, and there are so many hardworking people across the Caribbean region who go to work early, who work beyond their shifts, and yet still they feel the need to do so much more. And I don't know. I'm asking the question out loud. Michelle is an expert in this, and I just wonder if it's because it takes us away from a life that we would rather not live, or takes us away from things, or keeps us busy from things that we would rather not feel. Michelle is better than I am at this, but it's certainly things that I've been grappling with throughout this year.
What do you think, Mrs. Dunkley?
All right, well, that's a good point. And I think there might be different reasons why that happens. For some persons, I think it is that they really do love their job. And so there's some persons who are, I don't want to say obsessed, but their job kind of becomes one with them. And I think
their identity.
They're not doing right. And so if they're not doing something linked to their job, all the time, it's like they're lost. So that could be one thing. For some others, it can be maybe the need to achieve, and so you're going, because you have to, you must be the best. But then again, it could be too, as Ryan said, maybe some persons are trying to escape more unpleasant environments or situations.
Do you think
and so they immerse themselves in work which seems comfortable?
Do you think that society's pressures have a lot to do with those stress factors or those indicators that we just mentioned?
Yes, I think so, in some sense. And so we look at the whole financial, aspect of it. So if I don't have a nice car, if I'm not able to buy things, if I am not living in a particular area, it may spell, okay, I'm not successful, which of course we know is not true, but that is like a standard that is out there that, okay, these things will show that you are, you've arrived somewhere, so if I'm taking the bus, if I'm a professional, I'm taking a bus, wow, especially I guess in the Jamaican side a little different, because in Trinidad, I think I prefer to take the bus than be in bumper to bumper traffic for hours, but as a professional in Jamaica, if I'm there taking the bus and, especially in my setting, in the school setting, the students, they comment about it and they're like, wait, I've been one.
Breaking up a little bit. Yeah, the connection is a little.
She can't even afford, and that's just a simple. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing. We broke up a little bit. So what we're saying is that in perception has a lot to play with how we see our success in terms of our work life, and pertaining to men as they may have it in terms of society's outcry, they have it a little harder because they are seen as the providers, they are seen as the protectors, and that mental stress plays on their minds a lot, especially when you know that you're working this 9 to 5, you're tagging with the boss and you're doing everything that the boss says, but for some reason it's not enough. And eventually that stress translates to how they relate to their inner circle, meaning their wife, kids, family members, and then that translates into stress for, the members as well, and they react and respond. So how do we, well, you outlined a few steps a little while ago. I know that you have a few more. Probably you can give us those steps as well. How do we cope with those things?
Okay. Right, and as you rightly said, I do think the males may be a bit pressured, and there's a little counter to that because we see women, not just now, but women seem to be so successful, and so men, I think, too, are also. I don't fighting against that, but like in it's no longer where it's just a man thing. And so I think too that puts a little pressure on the male as well, if we really think about it. But as I said before, we stop and evaluate our situation and then we assess our priorities, because I think that's part of the issue. We get lost sometimes and we don't really look at what's important. So if making a certain amount of money, is a priority, we also have to look at how is this affecting, as you said, the circle of persons around us, or personal interactions, or relationships, or families. How is that affecting, that whole circle there? But once we have a better idea of how we can, adjust, and begin to prioritize what really matters, and then where am I going to make a compromise? Because we will have to make, some compromises. On the other side, where have I been making too many compromises? So is it that work has become, first place, and the poor wife and the children, they're just, they're just taken for granted. So it can work both ways. So what are some alternative things, that can be done to really ensure that we're giving enough time and energy to the things that are really important? Not that the work is not important, but we talk about balance, so it can't just be one. So we're talking about the balance, and the balance is important. Time management. So that's a crucial thing. As I mentioned about my husband, and he always talks about needing more time. And I'm like, in my mind, I said, if you had more time, I don't know how many more things you'd be doing, because you already seem to be doing so much. Right. So once we are able to see where our priorities lie, and see what's really important, then we can try to manage that time that we have, and review how we're spending the time that we have now. How do we spend our time, and what adjustments? Because that's something with life. We have to keep making adjustments, and we have to see where things can be shifted, so that we're able to have that balance, because the balance is really, really important. It's important, and we have to establish boundaries. So, and this is where, and as Ryan spoke to, this is where, so we get home and persons need to know, okay, after 6 o'clock, do not call me. After 6 o'clock, do not send me a work-related email. Things like that. So we have to set some boundaries and we have to hold to them. So if we say, okay, don't call me after 6, but then people keep calling and you're not saying, you know what, call me tomorrow, after 8 o'clock. Right, so if we set the boundaries, if we establish the boundaries, we have to have them enforced. We can't go back on it. I mean, of course, there are exceptions, there are emergencies, but we have to set those boundaries, else we will keep, getting back into the same rut, and then it defeats the whole purpose. And so we have to continuously be, tweaking how we're going to, go forward with it. Once we decide on the actions that we're going to do, and to get this effective work-life balance, we have to be making adjustments. If something's not working, then we make the adjustment. So it's not stuck in stone. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to look at how we can continuously be refining it, so that we can get it right. Because it is important. It's really important, that work-life balance. If we don't have it, then we know there are a number of things that it can affect. And we talk about, of physical well-being, emotional, mental health, so I've said a lot. So I'm gonna.
I just want to add one real quick thing, because Michelle made some excellent points, and just on the flip side of that, I know that she's spoken about our own mental well-being, our own physical well-being, and taking the time out to exercise and to exercise mentally. But I think we also must remember as well, Michelle, that in the case of if you have a family at home, it is for their well-being as well. These people are missing you. These people want to spend time with you. It's also important for them. So you may be wrapped up in your own head and your own career about advancing, getting a promotion, getting a raise, whatever else, while these people at home who care about you, who love you, who want to spend time with you, who may not necessarily care too much if you get the promotion, because it doesn't. I think I just wanted to make that point, that it's really, if you have a family, that really is important for them. It may not be, top of your priority, I guess, but it's certainly important for them.
One thing that I wanted to mention, I think that a lot of people struggle with, you see, the guilt that you feel once you establish your boundaries and say, listen, don't call me after 6, I'm spending time with the family. And when you start to actually have fun, you see that feeling of guilt. That's something that I personally struggle with from time to time, because I know I'm working all of these hours, I'm putting all of these commitments together, and I say, okay, I'm not going to answer the phone, I'm not going to look at Facebook, I'm not going to answer emails. And there's a small amount of guilt that creeps in and becomes bigger. And it's a little more difficult when you work in media, I guess, Mr. Beach, you could say that.
Yeah, I think so. I think because it's such a 24-hour
kind of situation.
It's round the clock. News is always happening. Important things could break very late at night. But again, you have to, and I love the fact that Michelle brought it up, and she used a very key word for me, the most key word in this conversation that we're having: intentional. It has to be intentional. We could want it, we could try for it, but we have to have the intent to establish boundaries. And maybe, your boundaries, Tosca, may look very different from mine. Maybe it's not possible for me to switch off my phone at 9 p.m. Maybe for somebody else, because they're on emergency call, they're a doctor, they're a nurse, and they have to be on standby. So in the context of our own lives, we would have to set boundaries
accordingly.
And I think it's important that I cannot tell you to switch your phone off at 9 p.m. and spend time with your family, because that may not be that's probably not impossible for you. Similar to me, maybe I could do it, but you can't. I think within the parameters, and this is what Michelle, I think, I hope I don't misquote her here, but this is what she's been trying to nail home. Within the context of our own lives, we have to do some introspection and really see how we can facilitate ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're doing it for ourselves and for our families, how we can set these boundaries intentionally to ensure that we don't run out of fuel, that we don't go crazy mentally because of the amount of hours, the number of hours that we are putting in on a week-to-week basis. I think that's a really excellent point that you've come up with.
Mrs. Dunkley, how about telling us what kind of language we can use with individuals who we're trying to set those boundaries to improve mental health, to improve the space that we're in? What kind of language can we use to encourage or foster that understanding that those boundaries have been set?
All right. So, as you said, as you mentioned, that whole feeling of guilt, but really and truly, we have to be selfish. We have to be selfish. And I know it's hard, as you said, and it depends on the type of work you're in. It's going to be hard sometimes to just shut out, everything, but I think for persons, because there's a misconception, that working long hours leads to increased productivity, right? But we know that there's a certain point where workers just can't go anymore, right? That's just the way. And I mean, human beings, we're just made up a certain way. So after a certain point, productivity goes down. You know, you get tired. Your mind is not working as it should, and things like that. So it's a real thing when we think of, you know, drawing that line. You know, if you're in, it depends on the type of work setting you're in. You can, I don't know, if you can say to persons, listen, you know, I really would love to, you know, be available to you. But, you know, I'm going to ask you, you know, as you understand, you know, I have my family and so on. And so, you know, really, after 6 is not a good time. But if you have an emergency, so things like that, I don't know if I'm answering your question. But in the case, for example, my husband, one of the things that he is a pastor. And so that combination of guidance counselor, pastor, coach, so his phone is going at some odd hours, you know, and so I myself have been trying to get him to get to say to persons, listen, you know, because I'm thinking persons should in their mind say, okay, well, you know, 10 o'clock is not a good time to call somebody, but I've realized that persons really, once they're in a need, once they have a situation, they're not thinking of the time. They just want to reach out to the person who can help them, you know, so it's not always possible to do, but I think once we get persons into the understanding of it, they will begin to respect, you know, those boundaries that we have placed and not see it as something negative. You know, but we have to be flexible, you know, as I hear, you know, Ryan saying, we have to be flexible because sometimes, you know, we can't just, you know, stick to that, you know, but the more we do try and put it in, and even to, as our families see us making that effort, it also helps them to appreciate, you know, more what is being done, because they see that, okay, you know, it's not that everybody can just call at any time and, you know, their needs are dealt with, but we are just left, you know, but so that helps too in getting the family to see, okay, you know, we are considered. We are not just, you know, we're not just there as a part of the package, you know. So we have to put things in place. One of the things that I'll say, my husband is also involved in football heavily, you know, from the days when he was playing to now when he's coaching. And so what I had to do, I had to make a decision to get involved in football.
As they say, if you can't beat them, join them.
Right. So I had to literally join.
Yeah.
And so, you know, persons look on and they say, wow, you
just say that again. You broke up. You're breaking up a little bit.
It's not
Hello? All right, so the connection.
To like it, and I understand one. Okay.
We got the connection there again?
Yes, I'm hearing you though.
Well, I'm hearing you now. So you were saying you got involved in football because you realized that the commitment that your husband has put to the game, it's not going to reduce. So you might as well, you know, join in.
Right. So, you know, as I say, when persons say, oh, you really love football, you know, deep down I'm saying, no, I don't really love football, but I've come to an acceptance of it.
Yes.
You know, and so over the years, right, so I've been able to help him in that way. And, you know, it's a little different because for him, even though football, so it's one of the things that he loves. So I guess it's easier for him because this, for some, it would be like a hobby or extra thing. It wouldn't be like work, but this is actually something that he loves. So even when it is work, because he coaches an actual team, you know, and is paid to do so. So, but it's still enjoyment for him, you know. So maybe that says something to us. I don't know if sometimes the things that we do, we should really maybe love them as things that we would even be able to use as extra activities. I don't know. So we can have our cake and eat it too. But I know that's not always possible.
Yeah, unfortunately. It's coming closer to the network news on TPC Radio Network and Freedom 106.5 FM. So I think we can start to close off here and give us your last bit of advice or comments for men, and in this case women as well, because we are partners to our men so that we can help them and better understand their situation with finding that balance between work and home. Are you there?
Right. So yes. So as I say, the work balance, the work-life balance is important. And what it does, once we can move to that balance, it makes life a little less stressful, and that's always a great thing. Because less stress means that we have less incidences of illness and disease and so on. It improves our emotional well-being if we can, try to get to that work-life balance. And at the end of the day, it actually can also increase our overall productivity. So if we're not killing ourselves at work, but we're having the balance, and at the end of the day, we can have that overall productivity, that increased productivity. That's a win-win situation, So we have to, as I'm going to say again, we have to be intentional. You have to make a decision, and it's really hard for some persons. And as I hear, both you and Ryan said, it's going to be really hard for some persons. But we have to, because when we look at the downside, the burnout is a serious thing. And I think we don't understand how, devastating burnout can be.
I think that the reason for that is we are in the midst of the burnout when we realize that we are burning out. Yeah.
When we're already on fire.
We are on fire.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of hard. We can't reverse, So it's really difficult. And I think one of the things, I think COVID, we blame COVID for a lot of things. And I think COVID has caused a lot of issues. And so, getting back to normal, some people have seen where during COVID, they had to work at home, and work became everything. And so for some persons, they've not been able to come out of that and really, begin to have that balance. And so I think in that sense, that was a negative, that I see, because it's still happening with other people. Other people I know are still working from home, and they're complaining because they don't have that balance. So they don't go into a 9 to 5 and then they get home. They're at home still working online, and so that has really caused, I think, for a lot of persons, that imbalance. But we have to be, I'm going to say, we have to be intentional, because it's about our well-being, it's about our health, mentally, physically. It's about maintaining our families, our relationships.
They're breaking up.
We have to have. I'm gone again?
No, go ahead. We just got you back.
Right. So I'm just saying that, it's really important, to have the work-life balance, so that all aspects of our being, our physical, emotional, mental health, will be able to work in sync, and we are able to really fulfill our potential, and not the end of it. So we have to make a decision. We have to be intentional. We have to make those changes, as hard as they might be. And changes don't come overnight. So it's going to take time.
It's going to take time.
It's going to take time.
I like the fact that you brought up COVID and work as a survival strategy within that period. And a lot of people haven't started coming out of that. Your last comments, Ryan, what are some of the things that you took away from this conversation, and what are some of the things you think you can put into practice to find that work-life balance?
The first thing is, like I mentioned, I think Michelle nailed it. I think there has to be some intent from us. If there is no intent, then we're not going to really go anywhere in executing it. So I think Michelle absolutely nailed it. My closing comments, though, for your second question, and it's a really good one, is that I think that loving your job is incredible. That's an incredible blessing. That's nothing but a blessing. Being in a job that you love going to every morning, that's a blessing. But I also think that what we should do is that we should have that intention of finding something else in our lives that could distract us away even from this blessing, even from this love that we have for this job. So whether you love playing sport or exercising, some people love art, some people love fashion, to redirect your energy to give that other part of your life, that second life, as I like to call it. I'm into watching football and I like watching track and field. Those are my getaway. I like reading, so getting away from those things. I think finding that other thing that we enjoy doing and that could take us away from our work life for a little bit, I think that's so critical. And we're having this conversation, Tosca, at a really good moment. It's 6 weeks away from the start of 2024. So for those of our friends listening to Freedom right now, let's challenge all of ourselves to start 2024 by giving that other side of us, that other interest of us, whether it's sport, whether it's fashion, whether it's art, whatever it is, whatever you're interested in, whether it's sewing, it could be as trivial. Let's challenge ourselves to look into it, to explore it at least a little bit come January and see where it leads to over the next 12 months.
And all in all, it's all about finding that balance and making yourself happy, because once you are happy, then it can translate to everyone around you. I want to thank you very much for coming on to the show, Ryan, and also Mrs. Dunkley. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Well, I can say Auntie Michelle.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming in and giving us the psychologist's angle for the situation, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tosca. Thank you so much, Michelle.